Hello, and welcome to World of Warbirds. I'm Brian Pierce. Early in the air war, the Allies had assumed that, in quotes, the bomber will always get through, close quotes. It didn't take long for the RAF to learn that this was definitely not the case, and they had switched to nighttime attack, choosing to try to hide on their way in and out of enemy territory. The USA, joining the conflict later, decided to try something different. Their B-17s and B-24s would carry bigger guns, 50 cal instead of 303, and would carry more of them. The American planes also had guns in the belly, as well as guns in the waist. It didn't really work, and in 1942, the American formations were getting their butts kicked by the Luftwaffe. Aggressive Luftwaffe fighters had learned to attack the American bombers from head-on at about 5 degrees above the horizon, also known as 12 o'clock high. There were fewer guns covering the U.S. bombers at this position, and the fire from the Luftwaffe fighters would sweep through the B-17s and B-24s, killing the pilots and the rest of the crew and destroying the bombers. Something had to be done, and if war does one thing well, it is to inspire experimentation. So, one thought came about was, well, maybe this isn't working because we're just not bringing enough guns to the fight. Let's double down on the guns for some of the B-17s and B-24s. In August 1942, the Army Air Force sent requests back to the Vega Aircraft Corporation, who was helping, along with Boeing and Douglas, in the all-out push to build bombers, to create a B-17 gunship that would be flown in a position to take the full brunt of the Luftwaffe attacks and in turn be able to dish out more punishment in return. So one of the new B-17Fs was yanked out of the production line and was heavily modified for the role. In fact, it was so heavily modified that it was renamed the YB-40. In the end, it looked as though it had been exposed to radiation that had caused tumors of extra guns and gun turrets all over its body. To guard that vulnerable 12 o'clock position, a powered chin turret was added under the nose with twin 50s to make the Luftwaffe fighter pilots think twice about coming in head-on. The tail turret, although it didn't get extra guns, did get larger windows for better visibility. Where the radio man's single 50 cal was usually mounted, was swapped in an extra Martin-powered twin 50 turret. Even the waist guns were doubled up to twin mounts, and these positions were staggered to allow for better freedom of movement for the gunners. I'm surprised that they didn't try to jam an extra Sperry ball turret under there too. Then you could say that the YB-40 really had balls. And sorry for that. But even without the fantasy extra ball turret, the YB-40 could have 18 or even more 50 caliber machine guns, which would require a lot of ammo. So the bomb bay was modified to not carry bombs, but lots and lots of 50 caliber bullets. The ammunition supply on board was 3 times that of a standard B-17F, which would mean about 11,275 rounds compared to 3,900 rounds. Also, because this plane was to go toe-to-toe with Luftwaffe fighters, extra armor protection was added. Meanwhile, over at Consolidated's San Diego facility, a single B-24D was pulled out of the production line and sent to Fort Worth, Texas for an equivalent gunship conversion to what was called the XB-41. The treatment was very similar as with the B-17 version. A Bendix remote-controlled turret was added to the chin position, and a second Martin-powered turret was added to the dorsal surface. The original dorsal turret behind the cockpit was modified so that it could be raised and lowered in flight. When fighting, it would go up to increase its field of fire. Then it could be lowered to decrease aerodynamic drag when not in use. The waist guns were also doubled up, and to feed all these extra guns, more ammo storage was also added to carry a total of 12,420 rounds. The completed XB-41 was delivered to Englewood Field, Florida on January 29, 1943 for testing. Meanwhile, over in the UK, the YB-40s were experiencing some problems. Firstly, they were finding that the YB-40 was freaking heavy. It was 4,000 pounds heavier than the planes it was supposed to protect. Secondly, the extra turrets and added guns added drag. In the 4 factors that affect an aircraft in flight, lift, weight, thrust, and drag, we've now added to weight and drag, and we didn't add thrust, so we know that lift and speed are going to suffer. Sure enough, it took twice as long to get to altitude with the YB-40s, and then they had a hard time keeping up, what with all the weight and drag of all the guns and extra turrets sticking out everywhere. Also, unlike the normal bombers that it would be escorting, which would toggle their loads over the target and then get a boost from being lighter on the trip back home, the YB-40 gunships would still be carrying a good part of their ammo and certainly the weight of the extra guns, armor, and all the other stuff, so they would not get that extra speed on the way home. The YB-40s flew 48 sorties and were accredited with 5 confirmed and 2 probable kills. 1 YB-40 was shot down, and then the test program was cancelled, and the gunships were sent home to be used as trainers. The XB-41 never even got to the theater. It was even fatter than its non-gunship sister B-24s at 6,000 pounds heavier. Back in Florida, it was found that it was also very unstable in flight due to its center of gravity now being out of whack. Consolidated really tried. They put the XB-41 on a diet and installed wide blade propellers to try to get more thrust out of them. However, due to the experiences of the YB-40s in Europe, the whole program was cancelled and only 1 prototype was ever built. For real protection, the bomber formations would have to wait for long-range fighter escorts. Now, not everything about these experiments was a waste. The chin turret from the gunship was incorporated into the later versions of B-17s and 24s. The offset waist guns positions were also a great idea, and that was kept too. Before we wrap up, we need to talk about 2 last mutants. The first is the B-17G, known as West End, was fitted with an experimental chin gun pod crammed with 6 fixed 50 caliber machine guns. The turret could not turn, and the guns were fired by the pilot, and this was not an official type prototype, but a field modification. The forward guns might have been effective against head-on Luftwaffe attack, but they could not help against flak, which damaged West End, and in the ensuing crash landing, unfortunately, the front gun pod was destroyed. Old 666, also known as Lucy, was a Pacific-based photo recon B-17 that was heavily modified by the aptly named Eager Beavers. In order to help survive their dangerous photo recon work, the Beavers lightened the aircraft by 2,000 pounds and added a fixed pilot-controlled forward-firing gun, a twin mount in the radio room, as well as in both waist positions. The mods indeed did the job. On the 16th of June 1943, the B-17 went on a solo mapping mission of Bougainville Island and the Japanese Buka aerodrome. The crew surely appreciated all the extra firepower when old 666 was forced to fight it out alone with 17 or 18 Zero fighters. Although 4 crew members were wounded and 1 was killed, and old 666 absorbed 5 20mm cannon and 187 bullet hits, she successfully landed at Dobadura, an Allied airfield on the eastern coast of Papua New Guinea. The pilots were each awarded the Medal of Honor, with the remainder of the aircrew receiving the Distinguished Service Cross. Amazingly, old 666 kept on fighting, survived the war, and returned to the USA at the end of the war for recycling. If you enjoy this sort of thing, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. Join our Patreon, and if you like to listen as well as watch, check out the audio podcast on Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts. Until next time.